My stepmother threw my inheritance papers into the fire. Dead mother can't give gifts, she laughed. My father said nothing. I didn't react. I just reached into my bag and set a thin, black envelope on the table. The photograph slipped from my trembling fingers, landing face down on the dusty floor behind the old cupboard. I'd been searching for my mother's jewelry box, the one Nicole claimed didn't exist, when I discovered this hidden treasure. My heart hammered against my ribs as I turned it over, revealing my mother's elegant handwriting. For my Amelia, when truth feels stolen. The words made no sense. Truth feels stolen? What did she mean? But something about those carefully penned letters sent a chill down my spine, as if Mom had reached beyond the grave to whisper a warning in my ear. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of resilience and justice. If you believe that young women deserve protection from those who would silence them, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach others who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. 6 months had passed since the funeral. 6 months since Ryan had stood at her graveside, tears streaming down his face, promising to honor her memory forever. 6 months since Nicole had appeared at our doorstep with her designer luggage and predatory smile, claiming she was there to help us through this difficult transition. Help? What a twisted joke. I clutched the photograph to my chest, studying my mother's radiant face. She'd been so alive in this picture, her eyes sparkling with secrets I'd never gotten the chance to learn. Now in her place stood a woman who treated our home like a conquest and me like an obstacle to be removed. The sound of Nicole's stilettos clicking across the hardwood floors made my stomach clench. I quickly slipped the photograph into my pocket, my fingers lingering on the smooth edges. Whatever Mom had meant by those words, I'd figure it out later. Amelia. Nicole's voice cut through the house like broken glass. Your father wants to see you in the living room. Now. Your father. Not Dad or Ryan. She'd stripped away even that small intimacy, reducing our relationship to clinical terms. I emerged from behind the cupboard, brushing dust from my clothes, and found Nicole standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against her silk blouse, a nervous habit she'd developed whenever she was about to deliver bad news. We need to discuss your living arrangements, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. This house needs better organization. Better organization. Code 4. Your presence is inconvenient. I walked past her without responding, my shoulder barely brushing hers. The living room had been transformed beyond recognition. Mom's antique furniture had vanished, replaced by Nicole's sterile modern pieces. The family portraits that once lined the mantelpiece were gone, erased as if we'd never existed. In their place sat Nicole's collection of crystal figurines, cold, lifeless objects that caught the light but reflected nothing meaningful. Ryan sat hunched on the leather sofa, avoiding my gaze. This man who'd once carried me on his shoulders, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework, now looked like a stranger. His shoulders sagged under invisible weight, and deep lines had carved themselves around his eyes. When had he become so diminished? Sit down, sweetheart, he said softly, patting the cushion beside him. But Nicole was quicker. She positioned herself between us, her hand resting possessively on Ryan's shoulder. Actually, Ryan, I think Amelia should stand. This won't take long. The dismissal hit like a slap. I remained standing, my chin lifted in defiance, while Nicole launched into her prepared speech about making space for healing and creating a fresh start. Translation. My bedroom was being converted into her personal office. Where exactly am I supposed to sleep? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. The guest room has a perfectly good bed, Nicole replied, waving her hand as if my question was trivial. Besides, you'll be going to college soon. It's time you learned to be more flexible. Flexible. As if I were the one being unreasonable. Ryan finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. I searched his face for any sign of the man who'd once been my hero, who'd promised Mom he'd always protect me. But all I saw was weakness and guilt, emotions he was too cowardly to address. It's just temporary, he mumbled, the words barely audible. Everything's temporary, Ryan, Nicole said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. That's what makes life exciting. That night, as I packed my belongings into boxes, I discovered more evidence of Nicole's systematic erasure. My mother's favorite cookbook had disappeared from the kitchen. The throw pillows she'd sewn by hand were gone from the family room. Even the small ceramic bird she'd kept on the windowsill, a gift from her own mother, had vanished without explanation. When I confronted Nicole about the missing items, she shrugged with theatrical innocence. "Oh, those old things. I donated them to charity. Your mother would have wanted them to help others, don't you think?" But it was the journals that broke something inside me. I'd been searching for them for weeks, hoping to find comfort in Mom's words during these dark times. Instead, I found torn pages scattered in the garbage bin behind the house, their edges blackened from where someone had tried to burn them. Mom's careful handwriting was partially destroyed, but I could make out fragments, suspicious of Ryan's finances. And Nicole asking too many questions about the will. My hands shook as I gathered the salvageable pieces, treating each fragment like a sacred relic. That night, alone in my new cramped quarters, I spread the pages across my bed and tried to piece together my mother's final thoughts. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Mom had been worried about something in the weeks before her death. Something involving money and Ryan, and Nicole's sudden interest in our family's affairs. The next evening I was studying in the guest room when I heard Nicole's voice drifting up from the kitchen. She was on the phone, her tone sharp and businesslike. "No, she's still here," Nicole was saying. "But she's just a kid. What can she really do? The will is straightforward enough, and Ryan's already signed most of the transfer papers." "Transfer papers?" My blood turned to ice. "Trust me," Nicole continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She's a legal nuisance at best. Once the will is settled, she won't matter much longer. Ryan's completely under my control now." I pressed my ear against the door, straining to catch every word. "The inheritance? Please. Dead women don't have much say in these matters. Everything will be ours within the month." That's when something fundamental shifted inside me. The grief that had been weighing me down for months transformed into something harder, more focused. Nicole had revealed her true nature, and Ryan was either complicit or too weak to stop her. Either way, I was alone in this fight. But maybe I wasn't as powerless as they believed. That night, I pulled out a notebook and began documenting everything. Every cruel comment, every missing item, every suspicious conversation. I wrote down dates, times, and witnesses. I photographed the torn journal pages and made copies of everything I could find. If Nicole wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules. And I'd win. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and careful documentation had turned me into someone I barely recognized. The shy girl who'd once accepted every slight without question was gone, replaced by someone with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. The law offices of Dalton and Associates sat in a brick building downtown, its windows grimy with age and neglect. I'd been here once before years ago, when Mom had insisted I accompany her for what she'd called important business. At the time, I'd been more interested in the candy dish on the receptionist's desk than whatever legal matters were being discussed. Now, standing before the heavy oak door, I felt the weight of that memory pressing down on me. The receptionist, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, looked up from her typewriter. "Can I help you, dear? I'm Amelia Morrison. I need to speak with Mr. Dalton about my mother's estate." Catherine Morrison. Her expression softened immediately. "Oh, sweetheart. I remember you. You're so much taller now." She pressed a button on her desk. "Mr. Dalton? Catherine Morrison's daughter is here to see you." The door to the inner office creaked open, revealing a man who seemed to have aged decades since I'd last seen him. Mr. Dalton's white hair had thinned considerably, and he walked with a pronounced limp, leaning heavily on a carved wooden cane. But his eyes, sharp and intelligent, remained exactly as I remembered. "Amelia," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that made my throat tighten. "I've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" He gestured toward a leather chair across from his desk. "Your mother was very specific about timing. She said you'd come when you were ready to hear the truth." My heart began to race. What truth? Mr. Dalton settled into his chair with a grunt, his arthritic fingers fumbling with a locked drawer. "Your mother was one of the most perceptive women I've ever known. She saw things others missed, understood patterns that escaped the rest of us." He withdrew a manila folder, its edges worn from handling. She came to me 6 months before she died, Amelia. He was concerned. Concerned about what? About your future. About Ryan. About the woman he'd been seeing. He paused, studying my face. She knew about Nicole long before you did. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. Nicole showed up after the funeral. Nicole showed up at your house after the funeral, Mr. Dalton corrected gently. She'd been in Ryan's life for over a year before that. Your mother hired a private investigator. He slid a photograph across the desk. Ryan and Nicole together at a restaurant laughing over wine. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 months before Mom's death. My hands trembled as I picked it up, studying Ryan's face. He looked happy. Happier than I'd seen him in years. Your mother left very specific instructions, Mr. Dalton continued. She anticipated that Nicole would eventually show her true colors, that she'd try to eliminate you from the picture entirely. Catherine was preparing for that possibility. He reached into the folder again, this time withdrawing a black envelope sealed with dark wax. My name was written across the front in Mom's careful handwriting. She told me to give this to you when her voice was silenced for good. I confess I didn't understand what she meant at the time. But given what you've probably experienced these past few months. I stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. What's inside? I don't know. She sealed it herself, made me promise not to open it under any circumstances. But she was very clear about the timing. You'll know when the moment is right. I took the envelope with shaking hands, feeling its weight. Whatever was inside felt substantial, important. I tucked it carefully into my purse, my mind reeling with questions. There's something else, Mr. Dalton said quietly. Your mother asked me to tell you about a storage unit downtown. Unit 47 at Secure Space on Maple Street. She said you'd need to look there when you started asking the right questions. I left the law office with more questions than answers, but also with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since Mom's death. The storage unit was a 20-minute drive through the city's older neighborhoods, past shops and cafes that had seen better days. Secure Space turned out to be a converted warehouse, its metal doors stretching in long rows under fluorescent lights. Unit 47 was in the back corner, secured with a combination lock. I tried Mom's birthday, then mine, then Ryan's. Nothing worked. Finally, in desperation, I tried the date of her death. The lock clicked open. Inside, I found boxes of documents, photographs, and personal items I thought had been lost forever. Mom's college yearbooks, letters from friends, financial records dating back years. But it was the small cardboard box labeled for Amelia that made my breath catch. Inside were items that didn't belong to the mother I thought I knew. A birth certificate with unfamiliar names, medical records from a doctor I'd never heard of, and correspondence with someone named Matthew Chin. The letters were intimate, loving, written in a hand I didn't recognize but signed with obvious affection. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was a photograph that made my world tilt sideways. It showed my mother, radiant and laughing, standing beside a man with kind eyes and graying temples. She looked younger than I'd ever seen her, her face free of the worry lines that had marked her final years. On the back, in her familiar handwriting, Matt. My real forever. I sank onto a nearby box, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Who was this man? Why had Mom kept his picture? And why had she hidden it away with documents that suggested? Oh, that was impossible. But as I continued searching through the box, more pieces of the puzzle emerged. Hospital records from my birth showed a different father's name than what appeared on my official birth certificate. Legal documents suggested a name change, a deliberate obscuring of the truth. And at the very bottom, a DNA test kit that had never been used, along with a note in Mom's handwriting. When you're ready to know who you really are. I spent the next hour cataloging everything, my mind struggling to process the implications. The mother I thought I knew had been keeping secrets, big ones. The man I'd called father my entire life might not be my biological parent. And somewhere out there was a man named Matthew Chin who apparently held the key to understanding my true identity. As I prepared to leave, I noticed one more item tucked behind the boxes. A small white envelope with my name on it. Inside was a key and an address along with a note. The woman who cared for me in my final weeks lives here. She knows things I couldn't tell you myself. Trust her, Amelia. She loved me like a daughter and she'll love you the same way. The address led me to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, where I found myself face to face with a woman whose eyes filled with tears the moment she saw me. "Oh, honey," she whispered, pulling me into a fierce hug. "You look just like her. I'm Margaret Santos. I was your mother's nurse those last few months. She told me you'd come eventually." Margaret's living room was filled with photographs and mementos, a shrine to the patients she'd cared for over the years. But it was the prominent place Mom's picture held on her mantle that told me everything I needed to know about their relationship. "She was scared," Margaret said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea. "Not of dying, she'd made peace with that. She was scared of what would happen to you after she was gone. She knew Ryan was weak, that he'd fall under Nicole's influence. She spent her last months trying to protect you from what was coming." "Did she know about?" I hesitated, unsure how to voice the question that was burning inside me. "About Matthew? Yes, she knew you'd find out eventually. She wanted to tell you herself, but she ran out of time." Margaret's eyes grew distant. "She never stopped loving him, you know. Even after she married Ryan, even after all those years. Matthew was her first love, her true love. You were the gift of that love." The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. But it also gave me something I'd been lacking for months. Hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. Mom had been preparing for this moment long before I even knew there was a battle to be fought. 2 days after my visit with Margaret, I returned home to find Nicole humming in the kitchen, her movements unnaturally cheerful as she arranged white lilies in a crystal vase. The flowers filled the room with their cloying sweetness, a scent that reminded me uncomfortably of funeral parlors. She'd changed the entire atmosphere of the house. Everything was pristine, sterile, as if she were preparing for an important guest. "Oh, Amelia," she called out without turning around, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Perfect timing. We're having a visitor tomorrow. Someone very important." The black envelope from Mr. Dalton seemed to burn against my chest where I'd hidden it beneath my shirt. I'd been carrying it everywhere since our meeting, waiting for the right moment. The moment Mom had somehow known would come. "What kind of visitor?" I asked, setting my backpack down slowly. Nicole finally turned, and I was struck by her appearance. She dressed entirely in white, a flowing silk blouse, tailored pants, even white shoes that looked fresh from the box. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and she wore the pearl necklace that had once belonged to my grandmother. The one Mom had promised would be mine someday. "The family lawyer, of course," Nicole said, touching the pearls at her throat. "It's time to settle some administrative details. Your mother's estate has been in limbo far too long." My blood turned cold. Mom's will was already read. Everything was settled months ago. "Oh, sweetheart," Nicole laughed, the sound like ice cracking. "There were some complications. Some documents that needed clarification. But don't worry your pretty little head about it. These grown-up matters will be handled properly." That evening, I watched from my bedroom window as Nicole directed Ryan in rearranging the living room furniture. She positioned the leather sofa to face the fireplace, placed a small table in the center, and lit candles around the room. The whole setup looked ceremonial, almost ritualistic. Ryan moved like a man in a trance, following her instructions without question or comment. I spent the night clutching the black envelope, Mom's words echoing in my mind, when her voice was silenced for good. Whatever was about to happen, I knew it would be the moment she'd been preparing for. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that makes everything feel ominous. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me feel strong. Dark jeans, a black sweater, and the silver locket Mom had given me for my 16th birthday. Inside the locket was a photo of us together, taken just months before she died. She looked tired but peaceful, as if she'd already made peace with whatever was coming. The lawyer arrived precisely at 10 o'clock. He was a thin man with nervous eyes and a briefcase that seemed too large for his slight frame. Nicole greeted him at the door like an old friend, her laughter echoing through the hallway as she led him to the living room. "Amelia, darling," she called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "Come join us. This concerns you too." I found them arranged around the coffee table. Nicole perched on the edge of the sofa like a bird of prey, Ryan slumped in his chair avoiding everyone's gaze, and the lawyer fumbling with papers from his briefcase. The original copy of Mom's will lay spread across the table, its pages crisp and official looking. "Now then," the lawyer began, his voice shaky. Mrs. Morrison, the current Mrs. Morrison, has brought to my attention some irregularities in the original will. It seems there may have been some confusion about the testator's mental state at the time of signing. Confusion. I spoke for the first time, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. Nicole waved her hand dismissively. Your mother was very sick at the end, dear. The medications, the pain. It's understandable that she might not have been thinking clearly. Leaving everything to a teenager? It's simply not practical. She was completely lucid when she signed that will, I said, my voice growing stronger. I was there. So was Mr. Dalton. Mr. Dalton is an old man with failing memory, Nicole replied smoothly. And you were grieving. Neither of you can be considered reliable witnesses to your mother's mental state. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. The new documentation suggests that Mrs. Morrison, Catherine Morrison, intended for her assets to be managed by her husband until Miss Morrison reaches the age of 25. At that time she would inherit a modest portion of the estate. How modest? I asked, though I already knew the answer would be insulting. Enough for college tuition and basic living expenses, Nicole said, her smile sharp as a knife. Your mother wouldn't have wanted you to be burdened with financial responsibilities at such a young age. Ryan finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment. I searched his face desperately for any sign of the man who'd once been my father, who'd promised Mom he'd always protect me. But all I saw was weakness and guilt, emotions he was too cowardly to confront. This is fraud, I said quietly. This is reality, Nicole snapped, her mask finally slipping. Your mother is dead, Amelia. Dead women don't get to make decisions anymore. The living have to clean up their messes. She stood up abruptly, snatching the will from the table with theatrical flourish. In one swift motion she strode to the fireplace and tossed the document into the flames. The papers caught immediately, curling and blackening as Mom's final wishes literally went up in smoke. Dead women can't give gifts, Nicole laughed, watching the flames consume the last legal protection my mother had tried to provide for me. The lawyer gasped, half rising from his chair. Mrs. Morrison, that was the original. That was a mistake, Nicole cut him off. A sick woman's delusion. We have the corrected version right here. She gestured toward the new documents spread across the table. I watched the flames dance, consuming the paper that represented my mother's love and protection. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt something else entirely, a cold clarity that settled over me like armor. This was the moment. The moment Mom had somehow known would come, when Nicole would reveal her true nature so completely that there could be no doubt about her intentions. Ryan said nothing. He just sat there staring at his hands, while his wife destroyed his dead wife's final wishes. In that moment I realized that the man I'd called father was already gone, replaced by someone too weak to fight for what was right, too broken to honor the woman he'd claimed to love. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or beg or plead. Instead, I reached into my bag with steady hands and withdrew the black envelope Mr. Dalton had given me. The wax seal caught the firelight as I placed it carefully on the table. Silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain. Nicole's triumphant expression faltered as she stared at the mysterious envelope. The lawyer's nervous shuffling stopped. Even Ryan looked up, confusion replacing the guilt in his eyes. You've triggered it, I said softly, my voice carrying a weight that seemed to fill the entire room. She knew you'd do this. She knew exactly what kind of person you really are, Nicole. And she left something behind for people like you. Nicole's face went pale, her confident smirk fading as she realized that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been as clever as she thought. The envelope sat between us like a loaded weapon, its black surface reflecting the dying flames of my mother's burned will. What is that? She whispered. I smiled for the first time in months, and it felt like my mother's smile, full of secrets and quiet power. Mom's insurance policy, I said. She always was 10 steps ahead of everyone else. My fingers trembled as I broke the black wax seal, the sound echoing through the silent room like a gunshot. Nicole's eyes were fixed on my hands, her earlier confidence cracking like paint on a weathered wall. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while Ryan remained frozen as if moving might shatter whatever fragile reality he'd been clinging to. Inside the envelope I found 2 documents that would change everything. The first was a legal clause, typed on official letterhead, with my mother's signature notarized at the bottom. The language was complex, full of legal terminology I didn't fully understand, but the core message was crystal clear. In the event that Catherine Morrison's last will and testament is destroyed, altered or otherwise invalidated by any party, the following trust provisions shall immediately activate. The second document made my breath catch in my throat. It was a DNA test result, sealed in its own smaller envelope with a note in Mom's handwriting. For when the truth can no longer be hidden. What does it say? Nicole demanded, her voice sharp with barely contained panic. I looked up at her, then at Ryan, then back at the DNA results in my hands. This moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that once I jumped, there would be no going back to the life I'd known. It says that everything you think you know about this family is a lie, I said quietly. With deliberate slowness, I unfolded the DNA test results. The scientific language was dense, but the conclusion was printed in bold letters at the bottom. Probability of paternity, 0%. Ryan Morrison is excluded as the biological father of Amelia Morrison. The paper slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the coffee table, landing face up where everyone could see it. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft crackling of the fireplace where my mother's will had been reduced to ash. Ryan's face went through a series of transformations, confusion, realization, and finally, a kind of hollow devastation that made my heart ache despite everything he'd put me through. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish pulled from water. That's impossible, he whispered. Is it? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Think about it, Ryan. Really think. When did you and Mom meet? When did she get pregnant? Do the math. Nicole's sharp laugh cut through the tension like a blade. Well. Looks like your precious Catherine was keeping secrets after all. A cheating wife and an illegitimate child. How perfectly scandalous. But her laughter died when she saw my expression. I wasn't devastated by this revelation. I was relieved. You still don't understand, I said, reaching back into the envelope. This isn't about scandal. This is about protection. I pulled out a business card that had been tucked behind the legal document. The name printed in elegant script made Nicole's face go white. Matthew Chin, attorney at law, Chin and Associates. My biological father, I announced, savoring the way Nicole's confident smirk completely disappeared. The man my mother never stopped loving. The man who's been watching over me my entire life. Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. Matt? From college. But Catherine said he moved away, that they lost touch. She said what she had to say to protect me, I replied. Because you, Ryan, you never legally adopted me. My birth certificate was amended when you married Mom, but the original documents still exist. And according to those documents, Matthew Chin has been my legal guardian all along. He just stepped back to let Mom live her life. I could see the pieces clicking together in Ryan's mind. The college tuition that always seemed mysteriously covered. The medical bills that never quite matched what insurance should have paid. The trust fund for emergencies that Mom claimed came from her parents' estate. He's been paying for everything, Ryan said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Everything, I confirmed. My education, my healthcare, even some of the household expenses you thought were coming from Mom's savings. She wanted me to have stability, a father figure, a normal family life. So Matt stepped into the shadows and let you play house. The nervous lawyer who'd come with Nicole was frantically shuffling through his papers, sweat beading on his forehead. Mrs. Morrison, I don't think. This changes everything. If there's a biological father with legal standing. Shut up, Nicole snapped, but her voice lacked its earlier authority. She was staring at the business card as if it might burst into flames. I stood up slowly, feeling taller than I had in months. The trust activated the moment you destroyed Mom's will. Every asset, every account, every piece of property, it's all legally mine now. Not when I turn 25. Now. That's fraud. Nicole shrieked, finally losing her composure completely. You can't just, this is all fake. Those documents are forged. The doorbell rang, cutting through her hysteria like divine intervention. I walked to the window and looked out to see a black sedan parked in our driveway. Two men in expensive suits were approaching the front door, briefcases in hand. Actually, I said, turning back to face the room, I think you'll find everything is perfectly legal. Those would be the attorneys from Chin and Associates. I called them this morning. Nicole's face cycled through several shades of red and white. You couldn't have known. I've known for 3 days, I interrupted. Ever since I visited Mom's storage unit and found the letters. Ever since I talked to Margaret, who told me the whole story. Ever since I realized that my mother was 10 steps ahead of everyone, including me. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. Ryan hadn't moved from his chair, staring at the DNA results as if they might change if he looked long enough. Matt wrote to her every week for 18 years. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. He wanted to be part of my life, but Mom was terrified that it would destabilize the family she tried to build. So they made an agreement. He'd support us financially and legally, but stay in the background until I was old enough to understand, or until... Until what? Ryan asked, his voice hollow. Until someone tried to take away what was rightfully mine, I finished. Mom knew exactly what kind of person Nicole was. She knew you'd be too weak to protect me when the time came. So she made sure I'd have protection from someone who actually loved me. I walked to the front door, my hand resting on the doorknob. Behind me, Nicole was screaming something about lawyers and fraud and injustice, but her words felt distant, powerless. The nervous lawyer was packing his briefcase with shaking hands, clearly wanting to escape before he became complicit in whatever was about to unfold. The beautiful thing about trusts, I said, looking back at Nicole one last time, is that they're designed to be ironclad. Especially when they're set up by someone as brilliant as Matthew Chen. You wanted to play games with legal documents? You're about to find out what happens when you challenge someone who actually knows how to use them. I opened the door to find 2 attorneys who looked nothing like Nicole's nervous, sweaty lawyer. These men radiated confidence and competence, their handshakes firm, their smiles warm but professional. Miss Morrison, the taller one said, I'm David Park from Chin and Associates. We've been looking forward to meeting you. Your father sent us. Behind me, I heard Nicole make a sound like a wounded animal. Ryan was still silent, still staring at the evidence of a truth he'd never suspected. Is he here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David Park smiled. He's waiting in the car. He wasn't sure if he'd want to see him yet, given the circumstances. But he's been waiting 18 years for this moment. Through the window, I could see a figure in the backseat of the sedan. My biological father. The man who'd loved my mother enough to step aside for her happiness, but who'd never truly let go. The man who'd been my invisible guardian angel, protecting me from a distance while I grew up calling another man, Dad. Everything I thought I knew about my life had just crumbled to ash like Mom's will in the fireplace. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The attorneys worked with surgical precision. Within 30 minutes of their arrival, David Park had spread documents across our dining room table like a general planning a campaign. Each paper was meticulously organized, each signature authenticated, each legal maneuver executed with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of preparation. The trust activation triggered several automatic procedures, David explained, his voice calm and professional as Nicole paced behind him like a caged animal. Bank accounts, property deeds, vehicle registrations, everything transfers immediately upon the destruction of the original will. Your mother was very thorough. I watched Nicole's face cycle through emotions. Disbelief, rage, panic, and finally a kind of desperate calculation as she realized the scope of what was happening. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers, frantically dialing numbers. Hello? Yes, this is Nicole Morrison. I need to access my account. What do you mean frozen? On whose authority? Her voice climbed higher with each word. This is ridiculous. I'm calling my lawyer. But David Park was already shaking his head. I'm afraid your lawyer will find himself quite busy today. Chin and Associates has filed motions in 3 different jurisdictions. The freezing orders were signed by judges who've been expecting these documents for months. Nicole's phone clattered to the floor as the reality hit her. Months? You've been planning this for months. 18 years actually, I said quietly. Ever since Matt realized he had a daughter he couldn't protect directly. The second attorney, who'd introduced himself as Marcus Webb, was reviewing a thick folder of financial documents. Mrs. Morrison, Nicole Morrison, it appears you've been quite busy these past 6 months. Multiple account transfers, property deed amendments, insurance beneficiary changes. All signed and notarized. Those were legitimate. Nicole snapped. Ryan signed everything willingly. Marcus looked up from his papers, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. Mr. Morrison, could you explain why you transferred ownership of your deceased wife's engagement ring to Mrs. Nicole Morrison just 3 weeks after the funeral? Ryan's face crumbled. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his choices. She said Catherine would have wanted her to have it. That it was a symbol of moving forward. And the antique furniture collection? The one that belonged to Catherine's grandmother. Nicole said it didn't match the new decor, Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. I felt something cold settle in my chest as the full scope of Nicole's systematic erasure became clear. She hadn't just been stealing money, she'd been stealing memories, pieces of my mother's life, fragments of our family history. David Park slid another document across the table. This is a comprehensive inventory of items sold, donated, or transferred in the past 6 months. Your mother anticipated this possibility and had everything catalogued and photographed before her death. The list was devastating. Mom's jewelry, her books, her art collection, even the handmade quilts her grandmother had sewn. All of it sold or given away by Nicole while I was grieving, while I was too broken to notice the systematic dismantling of my inheritance. You documented everything, I said, looking at Nicole with new understanding. Every theft, every lie, every piece of my mother you tried to erase. Nicole's mask finally slipped completely. She was dead. Dead people don't need jewelry. Dead people don't need photo albums. I was making room for the living. You were making room for yourself, I corrected, and erasing any trace that my mother ever existed. Marcus Webb stood up, adjusting his tie with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. Mrs. Nicole Morrison, you're being served with several court orders. Asset recovery, fraudulent transfer claims, and breach of fiduciary duty. You have 48 hours to vacate these premises. Vacate. Nicole's voice cracked. This is my home. I'm married too. You're married to a man who has no legal claim to this property, David Park interrupted. The house was owned by Catherine Morrison's trust. Ryan Morrison was listed as a beneficiary, but never as an owner. Upon Catherine's death, all assets transferred to her biological daughter. The words hit Ryan like physical blows. He slumped deeper into his chair, finally understanding the scope of his legal powerlessness. Catherine never told me, he whispered. All those years I thought. You thought she trusted you enough to make you an equal partner, I said, not unkindly. But she was protecting me from this exact scenario. She knew what would happen if someone like Nicole ever got their hands on everything she'd worked for. Over the next few hours, the house transformed around us. Movers arrived to reclaim furniture that belonged to the trust. A locksmith changed the security system codes. Even Nicole's precious crystal figurines were packed away. They'd been purchased with funds from Mom's accounts, making them legally mine. I found myself in Nicole's bedroom as she frantically packed her personal belongings. Her movements were jerky, desperate, like someone trying to salvage what they could from a sinking ship. That's when I saw it, a glint of gold tucked in the back of her jewelry drawer. Mom's wedding ring. The simple gold band she'd worn for 20 years, the one she'd never taken off even during her final illness. Nicole had stolen it from her jewelry box, probably within days of the funeral. I picked it up without saying a word, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. Nicole spun around when she heard the drawer close, her eyes immediately locking onto the ring in my hand. That was a gift, she said quickly. Ryan gave it to me. It was his to give. No, I said quietly, sliding the ring onto my right hand. It fit perfectly as if it had been waiting for me. It wasn't. I didn't put it on out of sentimentality or grief. I put it on as a promise, to myself, to my mother's memory, to the future I was finally free to build. I would never again let someone erase the people I loved. I would never again stand by silently while someone dismantled my family's legacy. By evening, the house was empty except for me. Nicole had left with 2 suitcases and a bitter promise to fight this in court. Ryan had followed her, mumbling apologies that carried no weight, explanations that explained nothing. The lawyers had departed with their boxes of evidence, their work here complete. I walked through the rooms slowly, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls looked strange without Nicole's sterile decorations, but they also looked hopeful. like blank canvases waiting for real life to return. Mom's furniture would be returned within the week. Her photos would go back up on the mantle. Her books would fill the shelves again. In the kitchen, I made myself a cup of tea using Mom's favorite mug, the one with painted violets that Nicole had banished to the back of a high cabinet. The tea tasted like victory and sadness and possibility all mixed together. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like celebrating. Nicole's downfall hadn't brought my mother back or healed the months of pain she'd inflicted. But it had given me something equally valuable, the understanding that I was stronger than I'd ever known, that my mother's love had built protections around me that stretched far beyond her death. Justice and grief, I realized, weren't opposing forces. They walked hand in hand through the empty rooms of my reclaimed home, partners in the long process of healing. The castle Nicole had tried to build on my mother's grave had collapsed, not through violence or revenge, but through the quiet, persistent power of truth. That night, I sat alone in the living room where this had all begun, where Nicole had burned my mother's will while laughing about dead women and their gifts. The fireplace was cold now, its ashes swept clean. But I wasn't cold. For the first time in months I was warm. I was home. I was free. The morning mist clung to the cemetery grass like whispered secrets as I walked the familiar path to Mom's grave. In my hands I carried a bouquet of white roses, her favorites, and the weight of everything that had changed since my last visit. The headstone looked the same, weathered gray marble with her name etched in elegant script, but I felt different approaching it. Lighter somehow, despite carrying the heavy truth of the past few days. I knelt beside the grave and arranged the flowers carefully, my fingers brushing against the cool stone. "I found it all, Mom," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the morning stillness. "Every secret, every plan, every piece of the puzzle you left behind. I understand now why you couldn't tell me yourself." The wind rustled through the oak trees above, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice in the sound, gentle, knowing, proud. She'd orchestrated everything from beyond the grave, leaving breadcrumbs for me to follow when I was strong enough, smart enough, ready enough to handle the truth. "Nicole's gone," I continued, pressing my palm flat against the headstone. "And I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. She showed me exactly who I am when everything else is stripped away. She showed me I'm your daughter in ways that have nothing to do with blood or DNA." 3 weeks later, I sat in a sterile conference room downtown, surrounded by lawyers and financial advisors who spoke in numbers and percentages that would have overwhelmed me months ago. But I wasn't the same girl who'd cowered in the guest room while Nicole dismantled my life. I listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and made decisions with a clarity that surprised everyone, including myself. "The Catherine Morrison Foundation," I announced, sliding a proposal across the mahogany table. "A scholarship fund for young women who've lost their voices, through trauma, family dysfunction, financial hardship, or legal manipulation. Women who were told to stay quiet when they should have been heard." David Park smiled as he reviewed my carefully drafted plans. "Your mother would be proud. This is exactly the kind of lasting impact she always talked about creating." "The second voice," I said, naming the program. "Because sometimes the first voice gets silenced, but the second one, the one that rises from the ashes, that one changes everything." The foundation's first recipient was a girl from across town whose stepfather had stolen her college fund. When I handed her the check at our small ceremony, I saw my own story reflected in her eyes. The disbelief, the relief, the dawning understanding that someone else had walked this path and survived. "Don't let them make you invisible," I told her, repeating words that Margaret Santos had whispered to me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "Your voice matters even when they try to convince you it doesn't." Meeting Matt had been awkward at first, like learning to speak a new language with someone who already knew all my words. We'd chosen neutral ground, a small cafe downtown where neither of us had memories to navigate around. He looked exactly like the man in the photograph from Mom's safety deposit box, just older, with silver threading through his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes. "I've been watching you from a distance for so long," he'd said over coffee that first day, his hands wrapped around his mug like he needed something to hold on to. "Your mother sent me pictures, report cards, newspaper clippings when you made honor roll. I have a whole album of your life that you didn't even know I was part of." We took things slowly, building a relationship on shared stories about Mom rather than trying to force an instant father-daughter bond. Matt never pushed, never demanded emotional intimacy I wasn't ready to give. Instead, he told me about their college years, about the dreams they'd shared, about the impossible choice Mom had made when she discovered she was pregnant. "She wanted to tell you about me when you turned 18, he explained during one of our monthly dinners. But then she got sick and Nicole appeared, and suddenly there wasn't time for gentle revelations. Everything had to be protection mode." "Did you hate Ryan?" I asked one evening as we walked through the park where he and Mom used to study together. Matt considered the question carefully, the way he approached everything, with thoughtfulness and measured honesty. "I felt sorry for him mostly. He loved your mother genuinely, but he never really understood her complexity. He saw the surface, beautiful, kind, devoted wife and mother. But he missed the strategist, the woman who could play chess 3 moves ahead of everyone else." 6 months after Nicole's departure, I received a single text message from Ryan: "I'm sorry." No explanation, no request for forgiveness, no attempt to rebuild what had been broken. Just 2 words that carried the weight of his guilt and the acknowledgement of his failures. I typed several responses, angry ones, sad ones, words that might have opened a door to reconciliation. But in the end, I deleted them all and put my phone away. Some apologies come too late to matter, and some bridges burn too completely to rebuild. Ryan had made his choices, and now I was free to make mine without waiting for closure that might never come. Nicole had vanished more completely, leaving behind only forwarding addresses and legal documents. Occasionally, David Park would update me on her failed attempts to challenge the trust or recover assets she'd never legally owned. But her presence in my life had diminished to what it always should have been: nothing. In my bedroom, now restored to its original warmth with Mom's furniture and my own belongings, I kept a small wooden box on the bookshelf. Inside lay the black envelope that had changed everything, its wax seal broken but its power undiminished. Sometimes, when grief threatened to overwhelm me or when I doubted my own strength, I'd take it out and reread the trust documents, the DNA results, the careful instructions Mom had left for protecting me. The envelope reminded me that love doesn't end with death. It transforms, becomes something more strategic and lasting. Real love leaves instructions, creates safeguards, builds bridges across time and silence. It anticipates the worst while hoping for the best, and it never, ever gives up. On the anniversary of Mom's death, I returned to her grave with a progress report. The foundation had helped 12 young women reclaim their voices. Matt and I had started a tradition of Sunday dinners where we cooked her favorite recipes and shared memories. The house felt alive again, filled with laughter and purpose instead of fear and silence. "I kept my promise," I told her headstone, placing fresh white roses beside the ones from my previous visit. "I didn't let them erase you. And I won't let anyone erase me either." The wind whispered through the oak leaves, carrying my words up toward a sky that seemed endless with possibility. Somewhere in that vastness I felt her presence, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a living part of who I'd become. Her legacy lived in my voice now, in the strength she'd built into my foundation, in the instructions she'd left for love to follow even after the first voice fell silent. The second voice was mine now, and I would never let it be silenced again. If this story of calculated justice had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Amelia calmly placed that black envelope on the table, knowing her mother had planned for this exact moment. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
I'm Natalie Mitchell, 24, and I just witnessed my parents give my sister Allison a brand new Tesla for her Yale graduation. Everyone was cheering as she screamed with excitement, jumping up and down in our perfectly manicured front yard. Meanwhile, I stood on the sidelines clutching my small gift box, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. The same knot I felt my entire life growing up in Allison's shadow. I never expected what would happen next when I opened my own gift. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment where you're watching from, hit subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked in your family, and let's get into this emotional roller coaster that changed everything between me and my perfect sister. To understand why that moment hit me so hard, you need to know about our family dynamic. I've always been the second choice, the afterthought in the Mitchell household. My dad, James, is a renowned cardiovascular surgeon at Boston Memorial. He's brilliant, respected, and has impossibly high standards. My mom, Karen, was Miss Massachusetts 1995 before becoming one of the top-selling real estate agents in our county. They're both driven, successful, and have always expected nothing less from their daughters. The problem? Only one of us seemed capable of meeting those expectations. And it wasn't me. Allison came into this world seemingly perfect. She was walking at 9 months, speaking in full sentences by age 2, and reading chapter books by kindergarten. She has our mom's striking beauty, tall, naturally blonde, with piercing blue eyes, and our dad's analytical mind. Everything came easily to her. Straight A's without studying, athletic trophies, student government, popularity. She's the kind of person other people hate to love because it's impossible not to adore her. I, on the other hand, struggled from the beginning. School was a battlefield for me. Words jumped around the page when I tried to read. Numbers refused to make sense. My teachers constantly told my parents, Natalie isn't applying herself or she needs to focus more. But the truth wouldn't come out until my freshman year of college when I finally got diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. 20 years of struggling, of feeling stupid, of watching disappointment flash across my parents' faces, all because they never bothered to have me properly tested. She's just not academically inclined like Allison, they'd say. She's more creative. That was their polite way of saying I wasn't smart enough. The favoritism showed in countless ways throughout our childhood. When Allison turned 16, she got a brand new Jeep with a big red bow in the driveway. For my 16th, I received a bus pass and access to Mom's old sedan on weekends if I filled the tank. Allison's birthdays featured elaborate parties with professional decorations, catering, and dozens of guests. My parents would often schedule my birthday celebrations on different days because they conflicted with Allison's competitions or events. One year, they completely forgot until my grandmother Dorothy called to wish me happy birthday and realized no one had planned anything. Speaking of Grandma Dorothy, she was my savior growing up. My mom's mother, she lived about an hour away in a cozy cottage filled with books and art. She was a retired art teacher who recognized my creative abilities when no one else did. While my parents attended every single one of Allison's soccer games, debate tournaments, and award ceremonies, it was Dorothy who showed up to my art exhibitions and school plays. She'd sit in the front row, beaming with pride, while my parents sent texts about being tied up with work or at Allison's state finals. Your mind works differently, Natalie, and that's your superpower, Dorothy would tell me. The world needs people who see things from unexpected angles. She was the one who encouraged me to pursue graphic design, the perfect blend of creativity and technology that somehow made sense to my scattered brain. I flourished in my college design program, graduating with honors 3 years ago, though my parents barely noticed. They were busy helping Allison prepare for Yale Law School interviews that weekend. They promised to make it to my ceremony, but called that morning with apologies. Allison had an important tennis match they couldn't miss. After graduation, I didn't move back home like Allison did during her breaks. Instead, I rented a tiny studio apartment downtown and started freelancing while working at a local design agency. I built my portfolio, won a regional design award last year, and recently landed a junior art director position at a boutique agency. My parents still refer to my career as my computer drawing hobby and regularly ask when I'm going to get a real job like Allison's upcoming position at a prestigious law firm. I've learned to find validation elsewhere, from satisfied clients, from my growing Instagram following where I share my designs, from my tight group of friends who understand my worth. But deep down, that little girl who just wanted her parents' approval still lives inside me, still hopes that someday they'll see me the way they see Allison. Despite everything, I don't hate my sister. That's the complicated part. Allison has always been kind to me, if somewhat oblivious to the imbalance in our family. She's generous, thoughtful, and genuinely supportive of my work when she remembers to ask about it. I sometimes wonder if she notices the disparity in how we're treated, but she's been so conditioned to being the center of attention that it probably seems normal to her. So when her Yale Law School graduation approached, I pushed down all those complicated feelings and prepared to play my supporting role once again in the Allison Mitchell show. 3 weeks before Allison's graduation, I requested time off from work. My boss, Julia, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned needing Thursday and Friday for my sister's graduation festivities. 2 days for a graduation? She asked. I explained that my parents had planned an elaborate celebration at their house following the actual ceremony. It's a whole thing, I said with a forced smile. Yale law, you know? Julia didn't know, but she approved my time off anyway. The week before the event, my mom called and asked if I could come over early to help decorate. You're so good with that artistic stuff, she said, which was her way of acknowledging my design skills without actually complimenting my career. Sure, Mom, I agreed, ignoring the familiar pang of frustration. What time do you need me? Could you come Wednesday evening and stay over? The caterers arrive at 10 a.m. Thursday, and we need everything looking perfect before they set up. Of course they hired caterers. When I graduated, we had a small dinner at an Italian restaurant where my dad spent half the evening answering work calls. Wednesday night, I arrived with my overnight bag and design supplies. Mom had ordered mountains of blue and white decorations, Yale colors, and wanted me to work my magic, arranging everything. I spent hours creating elegant centerpieces, hanging tasteful banners, and arranging photo displays of Allison throughout her academic journey. While setting up the photos, I couldn't help but notice the disproportionate documentation of our lives. There were entire albums dedicated to Allison's debate team victories, sports tournaments, and academic achievements. Meanwhile, my graduation photos were confined to a single frame on the bookshelf, partially hidden behind a trophy Allison won for equestrian competition when she was 12. As I worked, I overheard my parents in the kitchen discussing Allison's big surprise. Do you think the bow is big enough? Mom asked. I want it to look dramatic when we reveal it. The dealership said it's their largest bow, Dad replied. And the custom interior upgrades should be finished tomorrow morning. They're delivering it around noon, and they'll park it around the corner until we're ready. My stomach dropped as I realized they were talking about a car, and not just any car. They were giving Allison a Tesla. I thought about my own graduation gift, a $200 gift card to a professional clothing store so I could dress appropriately for job interviews. Despite this revelation, I continued working late into the night on a special gift I'd created for Allison, a beautifully designed photo collage featuring moments from her law school journey. I'd secretly contacted some of her classmates for photos she wasn't in, capturing the behind-the-scenes of her law school experience. I'd spent weeks on it, using my design skills to create something meaningful that showed I was proud of her despite our complicated relationship. But I wanted to give her something tangible too. The next morning, while finishing the decorations, I slipped out to a nearby antique store. My budget was tight, but I wanted to find something special. After an hour of searching, I discovered a vintage silver locket with a tiny Yale bulldog engraved on it. Inside, I placed a tiny photo of our grandmother Dorothy, who had always encouraged both of us to follow our dreams. The locket cost nearly half my rent, but seeing it, I felt a spark of hope that maybe this gift would show my parents that thoughtfulness mattered more than extravagance. That afternoon, I called my best friend Mia for moral support. They're giving her a Tesla, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. A Tesla? For graduation? That's insane, Mia replied. What did they give you again? A gift card to and Taylor. That's wow. Are you okay? I sighed, looking around at the perfect decorations I'd spent hours creating. I'm used to it. I keep hoping something will change, you know? That they'll eventually see me. You should say something, Nat. This has been going on forever. And ruin Allison's big day? I can't be that person. I paused. Besides, it's not her fault. She doesn't control what they give her. No, but she benefits from it. Has she ever once acknowledged the difference in how you're treated? I didn't have an answer for that. Had Allison ever noticed? Had she ever felt uncomfortable with the blatant favoritism? I wasn't sure. The morning of the party, I woke up early in my childhood bedroom, which had been converted into a home office the month after I moved out for college. Meanwhile, Allison's room remained perfectly preserved, waiting for her visits home. I spent extra time on my appearance, applying makeup carefully and styling my dark hair into soft waves. I chose a modest blue dress that had cost me 2 days freelance work. Looking in the mirror, I reminded myself that this day wasn't about me or my feelings. It was about celebrating Allison's achievement. I rehearsed my smile in the mirror, determined to be genuinely happy for my sister despite the knot of resentment and hurt that had taken up permanent residence in my chest. I loved Allison. I was proud of her. I just wished, for once, that someone would be equally proud of me. By noon, our family's colonial-style home was transformed into something out of a graduation special on HGTV. The caterers had set up elegant buffet tables on the patio. Bartenders prepared signature cocktails named after Yale law courses. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the living room. Everything was perfect, just as my parents demanded. Guests began arriving at 1 o'clock, extended family, my parents' country club friends, Allison's classmates, and her professors who had made the trip from New Haven. I stationed myself near the door, greeting people with a smile and directing them to the bar and appetizers. "You must be so proud of your sister," everyone said, as if that was my only identity, Allison's sister. Uncle Tyler spotted me refilling the ice bucket and came over, drink in hand. "There's my other niece. How's that computer drawing hobby going?" "It's graphic design, Uncle Tyler, and it's my career, not a hobby. I was actually promoted to junior art director last month." "That's nice, sweetie. Is that something you can make a living from these days?" Before I could answer, he spotted someone more interesting across the room. "Excuse me, I need to say hello to Dr. Friedman." I swallowed my frustration and continued helping with hosting duties. Mom was too busy showing off Allison's law school memorabilia to notice that I was handling the guest overflow. Dad was deep in conversation with Allison's constitutional law professor, probably discussing her brilliant thesis paper. At 2:30, Allison arrived to thunderous applause. She looked radiant in a white dress, her honor cords and stole draped perfectly around her shoulders. She laughed as everyone swarmed her, accepting hugs and congratulations with practiced grace. "There's my girl," Dad boomed, breaking away from his conversation to embrace her. "The youngest graduate in her class and top 3%. Allison beamed, soaking in the adoration. When she spotted me hovering near the kitchen door, she broke away from her admirers and came over to hug me. "The place looks amazing, Nat. Did you do all this?" I nodded. "Congratulations, Allie. I'm really proud of you." "Thanks," she said, squeezing my arm. "I couldn't have survived those all-nighters without your care packages. Those design-your-own-brief templates you made saved my life during finals." For a brief moment, I felt seen. But then Mom swooped in, pulling Allison away to meet the Hendersons, who came all the way from Providence just for you. As lunch transitioned to afternoon cocktails, Dad clinked his glass for attention. Everyone quieted as he launched into an emotional speech about Allison's achievements. "From the moment she was born, we knew Allison was destined for greatness," he began, his voice thick with pride. "Her first-grade teacher told us she had never seen a child grasp reading so quickly. Her high school principal said she was the most promising student to walk those halls in 30 years. He continued for 15 minutes, chronicling Allison's journey from precocious child to Yale law graduate. He mentioned her clerkship offers, the prestigious firms fighting to hire her, and how she was considering a future in politics. A senator, or maybe more, someday, he said with a wink that made the crowd murmur appreciatively. Not once did he mention his other daughter. Not once did he acknowledge my recent design award or promotion. I was invisible, as always. After the speech, Mom announced it was time for gifts. My stomach tightened as Dad asked everyone to follow him outside. I hung back, clutching my small gift box and the framed photo collage I'd created. "Everyone, we wanted to give Allison something special to commemorate this achievement," Dad announced when the crowd had gathered on the front lawn. He pulled out a small remote with a flourish. "Something to start her professional life with the success she deserves." He pressed the button, and from around the corner came the gleaming white Tesla Model S, sporting an enormous blue bow. The car purred up the driveway as everyone gasped and applauded. Allison's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "It's yours, sweetheart," Mom said, handing her the key fob. "Fully loaded, custom interior, and we've paid the insurance for the first year." Allison screamed with excitement, jumping up and down before hugging our parents fiercely. Everyone crowded around the vehicle, oohing and awing over its features. I stood alone on the porch steps, still holding my small gifts, feeling like I was watching the scene through thick glass. "It's something else, isn't it?" came a soft voice beside me. I turned to find Grandma Dorothy, who had arrived late and slipped in unnoticed. "It's a Tesla," I said flatly. "For graduation." Dorothy squeezed my hand. "Some gifts come with strings, Natalie. Remember that." I didn't understand what she meant, but her presence steadied me as we watched Allison giving her friends tours of her new car's interior. After about 20 minutes of Tesla admiration, the party moved back inside for cake and coffee. As the excitement over the car settled, Mom suddenly remembered my existence. "Oh," she exclaimed, a bit too loudly. "Natalie has something for you too, Allison." All eyes turned to me, and I felt my cheeks burn as I stepped forward with my gifts. The room had an uncomfortable energy, as if everyone was aware of the stark contrast between the Tesla outside and whatever modest offering I held in my hands. "It's not much," I said softly, hating how apologetic I sounded. Allison smiled genuinely as she took the packages. "You didn't have to get me anything, Nat." She opened the framed collage first, her eyes widening as she took in the dozens of carefully arranged photos capturing her law school journey. "Natalie, this is incredible," she said, tracing the design with her finger. "How did you get all these pictures?" "Some of these moments. I didn't even know anyone was photographing them." "I reached out to your friends," I explained. "I wanted to capture the whole experience, not just the formal stuff." Several of Allison's classmates crowded around, pointing and laughing at memories captured in the collage. I felt a small glow of satisfaction at their reaction. Next, Allison opened the small jewelry box containing the vintage locket. She gasped softly as she lifted it out. "It's from that antique store on Maple Street," I said. "The bulldog is hand-engraved." "And look inside." Allison carefully opened the locket to find the tiny photo of our grandmother. Her eyes met mine, and for once, I saw true understanding there. "Because she always believed in both of us," Allison said quietly. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Natalie." "This is beautiful." She hugged me briefly before Mom redirected everyone's attention to the elaborate cake being wheeled in. From across the room, I noticed Grandma Dorothy watching us with an unreadable expression. She caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod, as if confirming something to herself. As the cake was being served, Dad suddenly called for attention again. I almost forgot. "We have one more surprise." He looked around the room. "Where's Natalie?" Surprised at being acknowledged, I raised my hand awkwardly. "I'm here." Dad walked over and handed me a small envelope. "This is for you too," he said, though his tone lacked the enthusiasm he'd shown for Allison's gift. It felt more like an afterthought. The room fell into curious silence as I stared at the envelope. It was simple white stationery with my name written in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Confused, I looked up at Dorothy, who nodded encouragingly. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single key attached to a handmade ceramic keychain and a folded note. The keychain was painted with a small lighthouse, something I'd loved since childhood. I unfolded the note and began to read, "My dearest Natalie, some gifts aren't meant to be shared on someone else's special day, but your father insisted on giving you this now. Inside this envelope is the key to your graduation present, 3 years late, but perhaps right on time. When you graduated college, I watched you walk across that stage alone while your parents attended Allison's tennis match. I made a decision that day that has taken until now to fulfill. The key opens the front door to Lighthouse Cottage on Maple Cove, just down the shore from my place." It's yours, Natalie. Your own home, your own studio, your own place in this world where your creativity can flourish without shadows. Asterisk, your parents may not have noticed your graduation, but I did. Your parents may not understand your gifts, but I do. Asterisk, come see it tomorrow. We'll talk then. Asterisk, all my love. Asterisk, Grandma Dorothy. Asterisk, I looked up from the letter in shock, my eyes immediately finding my grandmother's across the room. She smiled gently, nodding once in confirmation. A house. My grandmother had bought me a house for my graduation. 3 years ago. The memory of my college graduation hit me like a physical blow. I had walked across the stage with highest honors in graphic design. The ceremony had been on a beautiful May morning, the kind of perfect spring day that feels like a gift itself. I had scanned the audience, hoping against hope to see my family despite their last-minute cancellation. The seats I'd reserved remained empty throughout the ceremony. I had told myself it didn't matter. I had celebrated with friends afterward, posed for photos with my professors who praised my portfolio, and pretended the ache in my chest was just excitement for the future. Later that evening, I received a text from Mom with a gift card code for Ann Taylor and a message for job interviews. Make sure to get something conservative. Congratulations, honey. And all this time, my grandmother had been planning something else entirely. Something that recognized not just my achievement, but my identity, my needs, my dreams. The room had gone completely silent as people realized something significant was happening. I looked up to see everyone staring at me, including my parents, who appeared confused rather than pleased. Dorothy? Mom said, her voice unnaturally high. What is this about? My grandmother stood and crossed the room to stand beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. It's about time, she said simply. I don't understand, my mother said, looking between me and Grandma Dorothy. What cottage? What is this about? The party guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Allison stepped forward, genuine concern on her face. Natalie? What's going on? My hands were still shaking as I held the key. Grandma bought me a house, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. For my college graduation. 3 years ago. My father frowned. Mother, you should have discussed this with us. Real estate is a serious investment, and Natalie isn't ready for James, Dorothy interrupted firmly. Natalie is 24 years old, has a successful career, and has been supporting herself since graduation. When exactly would she be ready, in your estimation? The pointed question hung in the air. Several guests suddenly became very interested in their cake. Perhaps we should discuss this later, my mother suggested tightly, glancing around at the audience. No, Dorothy replied. I think now is perfect. We're celebrating academic achievement and new beginnings, aren't we? She turned to the gathered guests. 3 years ago, Natalie graduated with highest honors in graphic design. Neither of her parents attended her ceremony because they were at Allison's tennis match. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. My father's face reddened. That's hardly fair, Dorothy. I purchased Lighthouse Cottage the week after Natalie's graduation, Dorothy continued as if he hadn't spoken. It's a small place on Maple Cove, about a mile down the shore from my house. It needs some work, but it has good bones and an exceptional north-facing studio space, with the kind of natural light artists dream about. She turned to me, her eyes soft with years of understanding. I've been waiting for the right moment to give it to you. When James insisted on giving you your gift today, I decided it was time. You've known about this? I asked my father, confusion swirling through me. He shifted uncomfortably. Your grandmother mentioned it last week when we were discussing Allison's gift. We thought it would be efficient to handle both at once. Of course. They hadn't wanted to bother with a separate occasion for me. Can I see it? I asked Dorothy, ignoring my parents. Tomorrow, she promised. It needs work, but I think you'll see its potential immediately. Allison stepped forward, her expression a mix of confusion and genuine happiness. Nat, that's amazing! Your own place by the ocean? With a studio. She hugged me impulsively. We should celebrate both of us. Her sincerity caught me off guard, and despite everything, I hugged her back. When we separated, I saw something new in her eyes, a dawning awareness, perhaps, of the imbalance that had always existed between us. The party resumed its rhythm, though with a different energy. Several guests made a point of coming to congratulate me about the cottage, asking about my design work with seemingly genuine interest. My parents circulated stiffly, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. Later, as people began to leave, Dorothy pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "I should explain more about the cottage," she said. "I've been watching your career blossom these past few years. Those Instagram posts of your designs, the agency work you share, the award you won last fall, I see it all." My throat tightened. "You follow my design account?" "Of course I do. I've watched you build your portfolio and develop your style. You have extraordinary talent, Natalie. But you need space to truly flourish. Not just physical space, but emotional space away from." She gestured vaguely toward the house where my parents were saying goodbye to guests. "The cottage isn't perfect," she continued. "The kitchen needs updating, and the bathroom is straight out of 1975. But the bones are good, and that studio space." She smiled. "The previous owner was a watercolorist. She designed that room specifically for creating art. North-facing windows, built-in storage, even a small deck overlooking the water." I could barely process what she was saying. "I don't know what to say, Grandma. It's too much." "It's not too much. It's exactly right." She took my hands in hers. "I've watched you shrink yourself in this house for years. I've seen you adjust your dreams to avoid disapproval, hide your accomplishments to keep the peace. You need a place where you can spread out, be loud, make mistakes, create without judgment." Tears filled my eyes as her words hit home. "How did you know?" "Because I see you, Natalie. I've always seen you." She squeezed my hands. "The cottage is yours, no strings attached. Make it your sanctuary." For the first time that day, perhaps for the first time in years, I felt truly seen and understood. Not as Allison's sister or James and Karen's disappointing daughter, but as Natalie Mitchell, graphic designer, artist, person of value. "Thank you," I whispered, the words entirely inadequate for what I was feeling. Dorothy smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I'll pick you up and show you your home." Home. My home. The concept was almost too big to grasp. As the last guests departed, I noticed Allison standing by her new Tesla, watching our grandmother drive away. She turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So," she said, "a cottage by the ocean. That's pretty amazing." I nodded, still processing everything. "I didn't know about your graduation," she said suddenly. "That Mom and Dad missed it for my tennis match. You never said anything." I shrugged, uncomfortable with her sudden awareness. "It wasn't your fault. But I should have known." She looked troubled, as if seeing our family dynamics clearly for the first time. "I want to see this cottage. Maybe I could help you fix it up this summer before I start at the firm in September." Her offer surprised me. "You'd want to do that?" "Of course." She smiled tentatively. "What are sisters for?" Perhaps this day of gifts had given us both something unexpected. Allison, a new perspective, and me, a glimmer of hope that our relationship could evolve into something more balanced. As we walked back inside, I clutched my cottage key, feeling its weight and promise in my palm. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning in more ways than one. The artificial cheerfulness that had sustained my parents through the end of the party collapsed as soon as the last guest departed. My mother began aggressively gathering dirty plates, her movements sharp with suppressed anger. Dad poured himself a scotch, his back rigid as he stared out the window. Allison and I exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the storm brewing. She began helping Mom with cleanup while I started breaking down the decorations I'd spent hours arranging. "That was completely inappropriate," Mom finally said, slamming a stack of plates onto the counter. Dorothy had no right to hijack Allison's special day with her statement. "Mom, it's fine," Allison said quickly. "I don't mind sharing the spotlight. It's cool that Natalie got such an amazing gift." "That's not the point," Dad interjected, turning from the window. "Your grandmother deliberately created a scene to make us look bad." I stopped folding the banner I was holding. Is that what you think happened? That this was about making me look bad? What else would you call it? Mom demanded. Announcing in front of everyone that we missed your graduation? As if we had a choice. Allison needed us that day. Something snapped inside me, a lifetime of swallowing hurt, of making myself small, of accepting that I would always come second. She had a tennis match, I said quietly. A tennis match versus my college graduation. Do you have any idea how that felt? To walk across that stage knowing every other graduate had someone cheering for them, but my seats were empty? Don't be dramatic, Natalie, Dad dismissed. You've always been oversensitive. We sent you a gift card. A gift card. I laughed hollowly. $200 to and Taylor while you just gave Allison a Tesla. Do you even hear yourselves? My mother crossed her arms defensively. Allison graduated from Yale Law School. You can't possibly expect equivalent gifts for a state university graphic design degree. Each word landed like a physical blow. Allison gasped. Mom, that's not fair. Life isn't fair, Dad said firmly. Some people achieve at higher levels than others and are rewarded accordingly. That's reality. The reality, I said, my voice shaking, is that you've favored Allison my entire life. Her elaborate birthday parties while mine were forgotten. Her achievements celebrated while mine were ignored. Her needs prioritized while mine were dismissed. That's ridiculous, Mom protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. Is it? When I was struggling in school, begging for help because I couldn't understand why reading was so difficult for me, what did you do? You compared me to Allison. You told me to try harder. You scheduled extra tutoring for me with high school students who had no idea how to help me. I turned to my father. And you, Dad? You called me lazy. Said I wasn't applying myself. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? To be trying her absolute hardest and still be told it's not enough? Natalie, he began, but I wasn't finished. It took until college for a professor to recognize the signs and suggest I get tested. Dyslexia and ADHD, Dad. Actual neurological conditions that explained everything I'd been struggling with. And when I called to tell you the diagnosis, do you remember what you said? He looked away, jaw tight. You said, well, I suppose that explains why you're not like your sister. Not, I'm sorry we missed this. Not, how can we help you now? Just confirmation that I would never measure up to Allison. The room fell silent except for my ragged breathing. Allison stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. I didn't know, she whispered. Natalie, I swear I didn't understand how bad it was. How could you? I replied, not unkindly. You were just living your life. The problem was never you, Allie. Don't put this all on us, my mother said, though her voice lacked conviction. We provided everything you needed. Private schools, college tuition, but not support, I interrupted. Not validation. Not love that didn't feel conditional on achievement. Of course we love you. Dad exploded. This victim narrative you're constructing is completely unfair. We're proud of what you've accomplished given your limitations. The word hung in the air like poison. Limitations, I repeated softly. There it is. You've never seen my differences as just that, differences. You've always seen them as deficiencies. Dad, that's horrible, Allison said, her voice breaking. Natalie is incredibly talented. Have you even looked at her design portfolio? The clients she's landed? The awards she won last year. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. I'm sure she's very creative. That's always been her area. She's brilliant, Allison insisted. Do you know she created custom templates that half my law school study group used for our briefs and case summaries? Professor Abernathy asked where we got them because they were so effective at organizing complex information visually. I stared at my sister, surprised by her vehement defense and the specific knowledge of my work. You knew about that? I asked. Of course I did. I've been bragging about my genius designer sister for years. She turned back to our parents. But you wouldn't know that because you never ask about Natalie when you call me. It's always about my accomplishments, my future, my potential. Do you have any idea how exhausting that is? My parents looked genuinely startled by this new perspective. What are you talking about? Mom asked. You've always thrived on achievement. Because it was the only way to get your attention. Allison exclaimed. Do you think I enjoyed the pressure? The constant expectation of perfection? The subtle message that my worth depended on my next accomplishment. She walked over to stand beside me, our shoulders touching in silent solidarity. I'm not the villain in Natalie's story, she continued more quietly. But I've benefited from your favoritism my whole life, and I never said anything. That makes me complicit. My father ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking older than his years. This is absurd. We've given both of you every advantage. No, Dad, I said gently. You gave Allison every advantage. I succeeded despite you, not because of you. That's enough, my mother snapped, tears in her eyes. I won't stand here and be accused of being a terrible parent when I've dedicated my life to this family. I'm not saying you're terrible parents, I clarified. I'm saying you've been unequal parents. There's a difference. And what do you want us to do about it now? Dad demanded. You're adults. What's done is done. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm despite the emotional storm we were navigating. I want you to hear me. Really hear me, maybe for the first time. I want you to recognize that your treatment of us has been unbalanced and that it's caused real pain. I want you to try to see me, not as a disappointment or a problem to be managed, but as your daughter who has built a life and career to be proud of, even without your support. My words hung in the air, heavy with decades of unspoken truth. After a long moment, my mother whispered, I didn't know you felt this way. You never asked, I replied simply. We stood in silence, the four of us caught in a moment of painful clarity. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the perfect lawn where Allison's Tesla gleamed in the golden light. Finally, Allison spoke. I want us to do better. All of us. She looked at our parents. Starting with acknowledging what Natalie has said instead of defending yourselves. My father opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I need time to process this, he said finally. But I hear you, Natalie. I'm not promising I agree with everything you've said, but I hear you. It wasn't an apology or an admission, but it was something. A crack in the wall of denial that had stood between us for so long. I'm going to stay at Mia's tonight, I said, suddenly exhausted by the emotional confrontation. And tomorrow I'm going to see the cottage with Grandma Dorothy. Can I come? Allison asked tentatively. To see the cottage, I mean. If that's okay with you. I nodded, touched by her request. I'd like that. As I packed my overnight bag, I felt lighter despite the difficult conversation. For years, I had carried the weight of unspoken hurt and resentment. Giving voice to those feelings, being heard, even reluctantly, had loosened something inside me. The cottage key sat on my dresser, catching the last rays of sunlight. It represented more than property. It was independence, recognition, a space to define myself outside the shadow of family expectations. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter, not just a new home, but perhaps the beginning of new family dynamics based on truth rather than comfortable fictions. 1 week after the graduation party, I stood on the weathered deck of Lighthouse Cottage, watching waves roll gently onto the shore below. The salty breeze carried the scent of blooming beach roses that grew wild along the property line. In the distance, a small sailboat tacked against the wind, its white sail bright against the blue horizon. I still can't believe this is mine, I said to myself, running my hand along the sun-warmed railing. The cottage was exactly as Dorothy had described, small but solid, in need of updates but full of character and potential. The 1970s kitchen with its avocado-colored appliances made me laugh, and the pink bathroom was truly a sight to behold, but the bones of the place were perfect. Hardwood floors throughout, a river stone fireplace, windows everywhere to capture the coastal light. And the studio space. My heart had nearly stopped when Dorothy first showed me the north-facing room with its wall of windows and vaulted ceiling. Built-in shelves and drawers lined one wall, perfect for organizing design materials. A previous owner had installed excellent track lighting. The deck outside the studio offered an unobstructed view of the cove, ideal for breaks when my eyes needed rest from the screen. I'd spent the week shuttling between my apartment and the cottage, bringing carloads of essentials and working remotely from the card table I'd set up temporarily in the studio. My apartment lease would end in 2 months, giving me time to properly move and make necessary repairs to the cottage. The sound of tires on gravel pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Allison's Tesla coming up the winding driveway. She had texted earlier asking if she could stop by with lunch. Our relationship had shifted since the confrontation with our parents, not dramatically, but noticeably. There was a new honesty between us, fragile but promising. "This view is incredible," Allison called as she climbed out of her car carrying a picnic basket. "No wonder you've been practically living here all week." I smiled and met her at the steps. "Wait until you see inside. It's a 1970s time capsule. Perfect for a designer," she teased. "You can go wild updating it." We set up lunch on the deck, gourmet sandwiches, fruit, and iced tea from the cafe in town. As we ate, Allison took in the panoramic ocean view. "I get it now," she said quietly. "Get what?" "Why Grandma Dorothy chose this place for you. It's like she bottled your personality and turned it into a house." She gestured around us. Creative, peaceful, a little bit separate from everything else, but with this amazing perspective. I was touched by her observation. "I've been thinking about that too." She knew what I needed before I did. Allison picked at her sandwich. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this week about everything. Our family, growing up, how different things were for us." I nodded, giving her space to continue. "I honestly never saw it clearly before," she admitted. "I mean, I knew Mom and Dad were harder on you about grades and stuff, but I thought that was just because school came easier to me. I didn't understand about the dyslexia and ADHD. It wasn't your responsibility to understand," I said. "You were just a kid too. But I should have noticed more as we got older." She met my eyes directly. "I should have said something when they missed your graduation for my tennis match. That was wrong, Nat. So wrong." I shrugged, uncomfortable with her intensity. "Water under the bridge now." "No, it's not. Because it's part of a pattern that's still happening." She set down her sandwich. "Mom called me yesterday to ask if I'd talked sense into you yet." "What does that mean?" "Apparently they think your outburst at the party was just you being dramatic and jealous of my Tesla." She rolled her eyes. "They wanted me to convince you to apologize for ruining my special day." I felt a familiar sinking sensation. "And what did you say?" "I told them they owed you an apology, not the other way around." She smiled at my surprised expression. "I also said if they couldn't acknowledge the validity of your feelings, they might lose their relationship with both daughters." I stared at her, stunned by this unexpected advocacy. "You said that to them?" "I did." She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Look, I'm not claiming I'm suddenly perfect. I've benefited from their favoritism my whole life, and I'm sure I've been blind to my own privilege in our family. But I want to do better. I want us to have a real relationship, not the weird competitive dynamic they created." "I'd like that too," I said softly. After lunch, I gave Allison a proper tour of the cottage. She exclaimed appropriately over the pink bathroom, "It's so bad it's almost good," and immediately began brainstorming renovation ideas. "What if we knocked out this wall to open up the kitchen?" she suggested, her law school precision suddenly channeled into home improvement. "And these cabinets could be repainted instead of replaced to save money." I asked, raising an eyebrow. She looked embarrassed. "Sorry, I'm overstepping. It's your place." "No, I assured her. "I could use the help, honestly. And the company." Her face brightened. "Really?" "Because I have 6 weeks before I start at the firm, and I need something to do besides panic about my future. Plus, manual labor might be good for my overachieving brain." We spent the afternoon measuring rooms and making lists of materials. Allison's methodical approach complemented my creative vision, and for the first time, our different strengths felt like an asset rather than a comparison point. As evening approached, Allison reluctantly said she needed to head back to the city. At the door, she hesitated. "Mom and Dad want to come see the cottage," she said. "They asked me to feel you out about it." I tensed. "I'm not ready for that." "That's what I figured. I'll tell them you need time." She hugged me quickly. "This is your space, Nat." You get to decide who enters it and when. After she left, I called Dorothy to thank her again for the life-changing gift. "I knew you'd make it yours quickly," she said when I described my renovation plans. "You've always had a gift for transformation, seeing the potential in things others might overlook." "I wish Mom and Dad could see that," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. "They're products of their generation and upbringing, Natalie. They value what they understand, traditional markers of success, clear paths, measurable outcomes. Your creativity, your different way of thinking, these things are beautiful but harder for them to quantify. That doesn't excuse how they've treated me." "No, it doesn't," she agreed. "But understanding might help you set appropriate expectations. They may never fully grasp your gifts or give you the specific validation you've wanted. The question is whether you can build a relationship with them within those limitations." Her wisdom, as always, hit home. "I'm still figuring that out. Take your time," she advised. "Meanwhile, focus on creating your sanctuary. Healing doesn't happen all at once." That evening, I set up my drafting table by the studio windows. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold and pink, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. I unpacked my favorite pens and notebook, then sat down to sketch some initial design concepts for the cottage renovation. As darkness fell, I lit a candle and continued working, ideas flowing freely in this space that felt so intrinsically mine. No pressure to conform, no voices questioning my choices, no need to make myself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. Just me, my creativity, and the sound of waves breaking on the shore below. The cottage would need work, lots of it. The bathroom would need complete renovation, the kitchen updating, walls repainted, floors refinished. But the foundation was solid. The structure was sound. Like me, it had good bones and untapped potential. I opened my laptop and began researching coastal-inspired color palettes, my mind already transforming the space into a reflection of my aesthetic. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn approval or meet someone else's standards. I was creating purely for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison, thinking about paint colors. "What if we did a soft sage green for the kitchen? Also, I'm bringing power tools this weekend." I smiled, realizing that healing came in unexpected forms. The sister who had unintentionally overshadowed me for years was now offering to help me build something new. The relationship was evolving, finding better balance. As for my parents, that path remained uncertain. Perhaps with time and boundaries, we could forge a healthier connection. Or perhaps I would need to accept the limitations Dorothy had described and find peace within them. Either way, I had this place, this sanctuary by the sea where I could be fully myself. I had my career that was flourishing on its own terms. I had Dorothy's unwavering belief in me, and now, possibly, a new relationship with my sister based on mutual respect rather than comparison. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts aren't the flashiest or most expensive. Sometimes they come in the form of a small key, a second chance, or the simple recognition of who you truly are. As I watched the moonlight ripple across the water outside my window, I felt something settle inside me, a sense of belonging, not to someone else's expectations, but to my own path. The journey ahead would have challenges, but for the first time, I was facing them from a place of strength rather than deficit. Some people get Teslas. Some get cottages by the sea. But the real gift is finding your own voice and the courage to use it, even when that means disrupting the comfortable patterns of the past to create something more authentic for the future. That night, I slept peacefully in my new home, lulled by the rhythm of waves against the shore, the sound of my own life, finally moving to its natural, beautiful beat. Have you ever felt overlooked in your family or received a gift that changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join our community of people finding their own paths. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it. Sometimes the most meaningful gifts are the ones that help us recognize ourselves.